see that? You just don't expect to see that, do you?
No. He was a pig, Chris. He was a pig in clothes. I don't want this to ruin our holiday.
You expect that of a kid who doesn't know any better, but that big bloody grown man, he must be, what, 35, something like that?
Yeah, he does.
And he's behaving like that in front of... It's setting an example to kids about we're in a place where there's bloody... It's a bloody heritage place.
I know.
I just cannot...
feel better if you had a scone.
No.
Do you want a scone?
No. They've not been preserved for hundreds of years, so that you can use them like a bloody toilet. Just stop telling me to shush because it's putting me on edge.
Tina Reid, your mother's on the phone.
I'm going to have to go and see what's wrong.
Hi everyone, it's B007 back again for another 10-minute movie review, and today I'm talking about Sightseers, which is the penultimate movie in my Ben Wheatley retrospective. And in fact, this is almost bang up to date. It's the third of his movies after Down Terrace and Kill List, and was released last year, where it actually played the Cannes Film Festival, which shows you how quickly he'd come, because his first movie, Down Terrace, as I said in that movie review, only played the sort of second-tier minor film festivals, and yet 2 films later he's playing the director's fortnight at Cannes, which is a great achievement. It had a pretty wide release at the back end of 2012 and into this year, actually. Opens in Sweden this Friday and is now available on DVD in most regions. So what can we say about Sightseers? If you saw the sort of surreal, dark humour and violence of Down Terrace and then felt that ratcheted up in Kill List, which was a brutal, cultishly violent movie in which the humour is still there but takes a little bit of a back seat, it might have come as a bit of a surprise to be faced with Sightseers, because this is a movie where that balance between horror and comedy is definitely tilted back the other way towards comedy. I mean, this is an absolutely laugh out loud funny movie. There are lines in this movie that I still quote to certain friends who have the same kind of sick humour that I do. The humour in this movie is very particularly British. So for instance, the lead character's a ginger. So in the UK, that immediately is funny. He's bearded, even funnier. He has a Brummie accent. Oh my god, it's like comedy tripled. The targets of the humour, Daily Mail readers, the National Trust, and all the way through, that kind of weird, uncomfortable feeling that British people have around sex. And at the same time, that ability to have really crude seaside humour, the sort of carry-on humour that you get on postcards at Brighton Beach. So it's a very, very odd film. But anyway, let me rewind a few steps. The plot of Sightseers is quite simple. You've got this middle-aged couple called Tina and Chris. And Chris, played by Steve Oram, is very much the dominant partner in this relationship. He may be bearded and ginger and a little bit sad, but he definitely has a plan. And his plan is to woo Tina, take her on holiday in a caravan. Again, immediately hilarious. And Tina's this kind of submissive, sweet, shy little woman who has been living with her domineering mother, a really quite nasty mother, and though guilt-ridden, manages to break away for this holiday. And she's just absolutely awestruck by how amazing it is to be with Chris and how wonderful it is to be somebody's girlfriend that they're going to protect and take out, even in this crummy caravan in the British countryside. So they go on this holiday and they meet other people who are caravanning and whatnot. And it soon becomes apparent to Tina that Chris is a homicidal maniac. And that whenever he gets pissed off by someone, as we all do in life, you know, the irritating people that just make us swear. And you kind of have this fancy vision, or maybe you don't because you're not a psychopath, that you're going to stab them in the face or run them over with a car. Well, Chris actually does that. That revelation comes quite early in the film. And the comedy part of the film is just seeing how Tina, this mild-mannered middle-class woman, is going to deal with this, given that for the first time in life she has a boyfriend and she doesn't want to lose him. And she kind of likes the fact that he's murdering people to protect her. And also, how is Chris going to react to Tina feeling that she is now complicit in his crimes? After all, he's the dominant man. Maybe he doesn't want someone tagging along for the ride. So that's pretty much it. It's a very simple film. It's a kind of weird take on that sort of Badlands, natural born killers, Bonnie and Clyde mythos, where a couple who's utterly loved up. And believe me, these guys are loved up. There are plenty of shots of them getting it on in a caravan. So it's that classic in-love rebel story, but just transposed to the British countryside. So as you can tell, I think this movie is hilarious. I absolutely loved every minute of it. I mean, classic one-liners like when Tina's bemoaning that Chris is off someone and she's like, he's not a person. And like, he's not a person, he's a Daily Mail reader. And then the other classic line, report that to the National Trust. I mean, I don't know how far anyone outside of this country is going to get that humour, but if you are British, it's absolutely freaking hilarious. So kudos to all involved. Ben Wheatley, you've got the classic sort of Ben Wheatley styling, which is, you know, audio and visuals that are not quite synced or that are jarringly unsynced deliberately to throw you off. You've got that juxtaposition of everyday banal British life and then horrific acts of murder, and that wonderful bleak humour that he just does so well. I feel that in terms of the tightness of the writing and how this movie is filmed, this is by far his most accomplished work. But really, I think you've got to give a lot of the credit to Alice Lowe and Steve Oram, who played the two lead characters, because not only do they act in the film, they have some of the writing credits too. And I think some of it was improvised, especially some of those hilarious lines. And if you look at their comic pedigree, it's absolutely superb. Alice Lowe most recently played Susan Noop in This Is Jinsey, which is a sort of cult British comedy TV show. And Steve Oram, I mean, he's a long-time collaborator of Steve Coogan's. He's been in a lot of stuff that Steve's done. So as I said, I think if you've got a strong stomach and a particularly British sensibility, you really do have to check this movie out. It's absolutely hilarious. I would say, though, that if you saw Kill List and loved that and are expecting more of the same, this really isn't, because that pendulum is swung so far from horror to comedy. And I think that's reflected in the film categorization. So the British Board of Film Classification gave this movie a 15. And when you think how much sex and sex talk and just genuine decapitations and whatnot are in this movie, you'd think it would be an 18. And I think, I mean, not that I want to speak for the censors, but I suspect they gave it a 15 because the context in which it's shown is just so funny. So really, this is much more in the kind of satire, spoof end of the spectrum, Ben Wheatley's work. But really, I think, his finest film to date. That said, we have yet to review A Field in England, which will be one of the next podcasts released, bringing us up to date on Ben Wheatley's oeuvre. So if you agree or disagree on my take, please feel free to post a comment on my blog at b007.com. In the meantime, thanks for listening.
You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. When a rabbit's running in the ditch. Oh no, must be the season. Oh no, must be the season. Oh no, must be the season of the wind. When I look over my shoulder.
Sightseers played Cannes 2012 and was released in the UK, Ireland, Australia, France, New Zealand last year. It opened earlier this year in Hungary, the Netherlands, Israel, Belgium, Poland, Germany, the USA, Qatar, rather surprisingly, Italy and Portugal, and it opens in Sweden on July 26th. Sightseers has a running time of just 88 minutes and is rated 15 in the UK for strong language, bloody violence, sex and sex references.